The following audio recording has been designed for learning purposes only. Do not share, distribute, or provide any type of copies, or this audio lesson will not be made available to you. Good luck with today's lesson.
All right, so what are we going to do today? We are actually going to talk about safety. So this is our last topic in our unit about these external factors that influence how we do this HR thing in an organization. So we started out with equal employment opportunity, we went into collective bargaining and labor relations, and now we're going to end with safety, health, and what your chapter calls risk management. So this topic is really about the fact that employers have an obligation to provide a safe working environment for their employees. And there is federal and state legislation that requires us to do that. So what we're going to do today is we're going to talk about, discover, identify those key pieces of legislation. On Tuesday, I will let you know that you have an in-class assignment that's going to take you out of this classroom. You are going to have to walk around campus. So I will keep an eye on the weather, but you do the same and dress appropriately. You'll be gone out of class on Tuesday for probably about 40 minutes, walking around to the different buildings on campus. Okay, so I just want to alert you to that. I'll remind you again, just so that you know, in case it's raining or something, bring an umbrella, right? So let's talk about this safety thing. So depending on the industry, of course, that we are in, but really all workplaces have some sort of risk of bad things happening. And so according to your textbook, we have some statistics where approximately we think 4 in 100 or 4% of our workforce experiences some sort of safety problem. They have some sort of accident at work. Now certainly in some environments, that rate can be very, very high. I think in office environments, you really wouldn't see a lot of accidents happening, but in a production environment, let's say, if we have a crew of roofers that tear off and install new roofs, I mean, that's probably a really dangerous industry relative to working in an office environment. So we kind of have to pay attention to what our industry has. As line managers, we're actually really important people in this whole safety thing. We are the ones that interact with our employees on a regular basis, and because we interact with our employees on a regular basis and we're very close to the jobs that are being performed, we know the inherent risks in those jobs. And so it is really on us to make sure that we are able to provide our employees a safe working environment. Top managers have to support us in that. Not only is it the law, but really creating the right culture of safety in our organization is a big deal. Probably one of the worst stories you may have likely ever heard about a toxic workplace safety culture is the British Petroleum, the BP Deepwater Horizon. That was the oil rig that exploded in the Gulf of Mexico several years back. It was the largest oil spill in history. They are an example of an employer gone very, very wrong in terms of a lax safety culture, and it cost them billions of dollars in fines, but it cost them the knowledge of having 11 people who died by working for your company because you wanted to save a few bucks and you didn't pay attention to some safety risks that were there. So obviously in some environments it's not a huge deal. In some environments it's a very big deal. Really interesting story the other day. I work with somebody in my office who has carpal tunnel syndrome, and she sits at a desk all day and works on a computer, and the employer will not modify her workstation for her. Says it's a comfort item, and she has a box, like a shoe box, that she rests her feet on, and she has like a gel strip by her keyboard that she bought with her own money, because her employer won't provide a modified work environment for her. And I thought, my HR antenna are up. I don't think that that's right. And so I actually talked to the boss about it. And I said, boss, why are we okay with this? Why is Mary having to provide her own accommodations? And the boss said, well, I don't know. This is the first time I'm hearing about it, so I'm going to dig more. My understanding is that she won't ask because she's been told that her employer will say, no, we're not going to pay for any type of modification at a workstation. And we're going to learn today that that's actually, I'm not sure that's even legal. So I don't know, I think that's an issue. As a line manager, you gotta be aware of that stuff, right? You gotta walk around. First of all, you gotta know the jobs that your employees are performing. Secondly, you gotta walk around and you just gotta take a look at things. Is there anything going on in the work environment that poses a safety risk? Now, how many of you work in environments that you would consider to be pretty risky in terms of safety? Like, it's kind of likely that bad things could happen.
Restaurant.
Okay, so a restaurant, you think it could happen? Okay, so retail, some bad things, yep, some bad things could happen. We could have some safety risks. Anybody else? I mean, I think where I work is relatively safe. Sure. Sure, okay. So, yep, people moving around doing stuff, right? So that's, I mean, as a supervisor, as a line manager, we're the front end. We are the ones that want to make sure that our employees are being provided a safe working environment. Why? Well, because, first of all, it's required. So it's a legal requirement that employers provide a safe working environment for their employees. What law tells us we have to do that? The Occupational Safety and Health Act of 1970, otherwise known as OSHA. Remember, federal legislators, when they write laws, they don't intend to enforce the laws themselves. They create an agency. They created an agency at the same time, also called OSHA. That was really creative. And so OSHA is the administration, and OSHA is also the act. And what the law says and what the agency does is they actually make sure that they take a look at various work environments to look for risks, to mitigate risks. So OSHA actually goes around and inspects employer facilities. They can't do everything. They can't be everywhere all of the time. So they actually have a little bit of a pecking order to their inspections. Oddly enough, they don't inspect workplace fatalities as their number one priority. They inspect imminent danger as their number one priority. And I think that kind of makes sense. Sadly, if there's been a workplace fatality, there's nothing we can do to prevent it after the fact, correct? I mean, we can prevent something from happening next time, but unfortunately, if a worker has died on the job, they've already died. So OSHA actually makes it a priority to inspect workplaces where they feel imminent danger is certain. How do they know where there are workplaces with imminent danger? Well, they have hotlines and they have tip lines where employees can report situations of imminent danger. Okay, so they'll get out and they'll inspect those first. They will inspect catastrophes. They'll inspect those catastrophic accidents with fatalities as their number two priority. They'll inspect complaints. They'll inspect certain industries more often. And then they'll do general inspections. So if you work in an office environment, my guess is that you could go an entire career and never see an OSHA inspector, okay? They're not heavily staffed. They're not heavily funded. They rely on state agencies. By the way, Michigan has an Occupational Safety and Health Act. I don't know when it was enacted, but it was probably around the same time. And they have an agency called MIOSH. That will do the same thing that the federal agency does. And so sometimes they pass it along to the state agencies to ensure safety, okay? So they can fine, they can shut you down, they can make sure that you fix what needs to be fixed. Okay, so what does OSHA the law tell us? Well, OSHA the law tells us that first of all, our employers have responsibilities. So bottom line is that every employer, every company that is subject to this law has the responsibility to provide a safe workplace, okay? So they have to provide the safe workplace physically, and they have to train employees on what a safe workplace is. So employers, every employer that's subject to the law, which is virtually all employers, have an obligation to say, this is what a safe workplace is, this is how we need you to comply, and then make sure that everybody does it, okay? So so as employees, we have the right to that safe workplace. And I think of like, you know, big issues like, you know, imminent danger and in accidents, but I also think of like everyday safety risks. In today's technologically driven environment, that could be somebody that sits at a desk all day and develops a repetitive motion injury. And that makes me think of Mary, that I work with, because she's actually been treated for carpal tunnel syndrome, okay? And so because she works at a computer and sits at a desk all day, is her employer required to provide some sort of adaptation? And I'm going to argue yes, her employer is. So employees have those rights to that safe workplace. Now, oddly enough, there are some rights and responsibilities on both parts, and I'm going to tell you the other side of the story. So the employer has the responsibility to provide a safe workplace, but the employer also has the right to command that their employees follow the rules. So let's say that there is something bad that happens in the workplace. We do have an incident or an accident, and we know, let's say, this is a really common example, somebody has an eye injury, right? And somebody says, oh my gosh, I have an eye injury, OSHA, come inspect my workplace. And OSHA comes and inspects the workplace, and they determined that the employer had procedures, they had rules, they had standards, they gave everybody safety goggles, they commanded that everybody wore safety goggles, and this person was slacking and not wearing safety goggles. They're not going to find the employer at fault. They're actually going to find the employee at fault for not following the rules that the employer set out. I think that's only fair, right? So that's good. So the employee has the responsibility to follow the rules, just like the employer has the right to expect that people will follow the rules that they set. Okay, so it's kind of an interesting setup with OSHA versus other types of law. Okay. The other thing is that OSHA, in terms of enforcement, is actually pretty friendly. They realize the value in preventing accidents. That's the whole key, right? That's a feed-forward control. We want to prevent accidents from happening in the first place. So what we do is we say, employer, if you want us to come out, OSHA, if you want us to come out and inspect your workplace and consult with you on how you can make it safer, we will help you with that. And so you're not going to get busted. We're coming out as consultants, not as enforcers. And I think that's actually kind of a neat thing that most federal agencies wouldn't do. Now, how easy is it to get OSHA to come out and consult? I have no idea. Okay, they're pretty stretched. So, but I think the thing is that they'll take a look at your workplace. Now, let's take a look at the accidents themselves. So there are a couple of things that can happen that cause accidents. There's a chance occurrence. There's just a completely random chance occurrence that something could fall out of the sky onto C building, and it could be a catastrophe here, right? Right. Is it going to happen? I mean, probably not. But I mean, it could, right? It's a chance occurrence. And so those can happen, but we're really not going to be focused on those because you can only mitigate those so much. I mean, we could make sure the FAA is doing its job and making sure, planes stay up in the sky or something. But I mean, other than that, it's a chance occurrence. It's random. It happens. Bad weather happens, whatever it is. Okay. So chance occurrences are something that we can plan on a contingency basis for, but we really can't address like the other two conditions. So we have unsafe conditions and unsafe acts. Unsafe conditions are the environment. What's going on in the environment that poses a risk? If there were cords on the floor, that would pose a tripping risk, right? That's an unsafe condition. If the flooring's coming up in the hallway, that's an unsafe condition. If the stairs aren't stable, that's an unsafe condition. There's a guardrail that you can, when you take the walkway from J building to the 300 level of K building, there's like a little bridge, a pedestrian bridge that goes across. That rail used to be super loose. The reason why I know is because a couple of years ago, my students did a safety audit on campus, and they took a video of somebody going like this with the guardrail, and they were like, wow, that's not safe. And so it's kind of an interesting story. They sent it to me. They actually posted it in Canvas, and they said, hey, like for real, this is kind of a big deal. Like, should you notify somebody of this? And of course I said, I think I should. And so I sent it to my boss, and my boss actually sent it to the facilities crew, and they fixed it. So that was kind of nice. Students in action, making good things happen on campus, right? That's an unsafe condition. So we want to prevent those. If we run across unsafe conditions, we want to fix them so they're no longer unsafe. There's also another risk, and this is when employees are doing things that aren't safe. So give me an example of in your workplace that you think you've caught somebody doing something and you think it's an unsafe act. Sarah.
Well, it's not really in my workplace, but when I was before before I was giving birth to like my first kid or whatever, like they were working on a hospital, and then the company got fired because nobody wanted to wear helmets, and then you know like the little sling that they pull to put people up to work on like heights and
Outside.
stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and then like having like protection or whatever. Well, the company like refused to wear hats and stuff like that.
So the employees at the company didn't wear their safety gear.
Yeah.
Great example. Great example of unsafe acts. Employees don't wear their safety gear, right? That example of somebody got an eye injury because they refused to wear their safety goggles. That's like the quintessential example of an unsafe act. My son was part of a lawn crew over the summer. That was a summer job for a few years. You know, and on the first day, the owner would always, here's your safety goggles. And Brendan would be like, that's nice. You know, and they stayed in his truck the entire summer, right? Be like, all right, but your boss is giving you safety goggles for a reason. And he was the weed whipper dude, you know, on the crew. And so I was like, okay, I'm just telling you, like, higher socks, wearing jeans when you can, and safety goggles are probably a thing, I'm just going to say. And so, yeah, he wasn't behaving in a safe way. He came home with all kinds of gashes on his legs from rocks hitting his legs, and I was like, dummy. So talk about unsafe acts, right? So there are employees in the workplace that do things that are really risky, okay? And so we're focused really on the two bottom ones. Conditions that exist that pose a risk, people doing things that aren't safe, okay, that are putting themselves or other people at risk. Okay, so we want to minimize this stuff, and so we've got to take a look around our business, around our company, and just see what chances there are for something to go wrong. And remember, I said that that's really on us. Now, we do need some support in this, and depending on our company's culture, this may or may not be an easy thing to do. Some organizations, safety is a really big deal. The plants in the company where my husband works, they get newsletters all the time, you know, X number of days without a workplace accident, go us, right? And so that's good, you can tell. He's worked at other companies where, you know, they don't want to spend the money to provide the protection that employees need. That's part of the culture. That's something that's a little bit more problematic. And like I said, with the BP Deepwater Horizon, one of the things that British Petroleum was accused of was having a toxic safety climate. So they didn't believe in safety. They said they believed in safety, but they didn't behave in the way that matched their words. And a toxic safety climate is just that really bad environment where unsafe acts and unsafe conditions are going to exist. We're going to make bad choices that put people in danger.
Okay, so I was reading a book in high school about meat, the different grades.
Mm-hmm.
I forgot the name of the book, but they were saying the work conditions were unsafe because people's hands would fall into the grinder, rats would fall into the meat, and
Meatpacking facilities are some of the most unsafe working conditions that exist.
and that's before the FDA, the book.
Oh no, that's despite the FDA.
Yeah. And then, like,
They can't be everywhere all the time.
So, like, it was just horrible.
Okay.
It was.
Yeah, I mean it is. It's actually a really big thing. I'm such a nerd. I used to watch the Discovery Channel. I used to watch Deadliest Catch. That was like one of my favorite shows when Brennan was little, right? That's like the most unsafe occupation on the planet is crab fisherman, you know, because there's just so many things that can go wrong. But you don't, obviously some of it is inherent, but you can't let that stop you from at least trying to take the right, do the right thing. There's a lot of pressure though, because doing the right thing often costs money, and as we know in a lot of organizations, we're under this immense pressure to just control costs. So it's something, or to change employee behavior so that they do follow the rules. I have a lot of students who work in production environments that tell me, oh my gosh, there's a person who drives the forklift at my plant, and there's no way that person should be allowed to drive the forklift. They're so reckless with it. They almost ran over my boss the other day. Just all kinds of stuff like that. And I think by nature, we tend to get complacent when we're in a work environment. And, at first the forklift, it's like, ooh, big deal, be careful. And then all of a sudden, people are driving it around like it's no big deal. So I think it's as leaders, we have to set the tone with what is okay and not okay for our employees to do. So our goal then is to minimize this. So we want to use as much feed-forward control as we can use, and we want to prevent accidents. So there's two ways to prevent accidents. We're either going to address the unsafe conditions or the unsafe acts. When we prevent accidents by reducing unsafe conditions, we're looking at the environment. I'm looking at people doing their jobs. I'm looking at the jobs themselves. I'm asking myself, okay, this person that works on this station on the assembly line, what risks are inherent in this job that I need to be aware of? And it's not just like, boom, something can suddenly go wrong. A risk can be something as simple as this person has to bend over every single time they touch the assembly line. So think about that. Has anybody ever worked on an assembly line? Have you ever worked on a line? Okay, so Terrence, you have? So if you have somebody bend over 652 times a day, what's going to happen? You're going to have back problems. Is that your fault as the employer? Yes, it is. Yes, it is. You have to do something about that. What might you do to prevent that employee's back problems? Okay. What else? Okay. What else? How? How? Raise the assembly line. And as a matter of fact, that's actually what you see in a lot of production environments today. The assembly lines don't roll along the floor, they actually roll along the middle of the space so that an employee is actually standing and it's something is at eye level and they're not reaching up and they're not bending over. Why? Because Frederick Taylor told us that, as a matter of fact, right? You know, that repetitive motion and that one best way to do a job. Well, if somebody's killing their back over that one best way to do, you know, because it's not the one best way to do the job, fix the assembly line. Folks, we call that a hazard analysis. We take a look at the nature of the job and we say, okay, what are all the hazards associated with that job? So if you were to take a look at, oh, I don't know, the professor of business management at Macomb Community College, you guys are familiar with professor jobs. What type of hazards are inherent in the job of a professor? Okay, so standing for too long? Typing, too much computer work. Okay. Talking, I could lose my voice. Not likely, but yes. What other hazards exist? So I could stand too long, sit too long, stare at a computer too long. I do all of those, by the way. My students will attack me?
No, they themselves.
My students are a hazard?
Yes.
You guys aren't a hazard. Come on. Sure, the garden variety, I'll slip on the pavement or I'll slip on the ice that's never cleared. Yeah. I could trip over somebody's backpack in the classroom. Okay, that's legitimate. Yep, the repetitive motion. Yep. Actually, I never wore bifocals until I started, teaching. Now I have the shittiest eyesight on the planet. It's not fixable and I can't wear contacts, but that's okay. So, like, what other risks are inherent? Because those are all like, you're doing a good job. You're thinking, okay, what does a professor do in the course of their day that might be inherent? Think about the environment. What risks are inherent in the environment, like on campus?
You could slip over something, or if they're doing construction or whatever.
Okay. Okay, I could fall down the stairs. I could slip on pavement. There could be construction that's not locked up or fenced off appropriately. Anything else? Something can fall from the sky and hit C building. It stresses me out, actually. Anxiety every Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday. Just kidding. It doesn't. I don't worry about it. Are there any other risks inherent in working on a college campus? Man, I can think of one. I'm surprised nobody has said it. What's the thing? Yeah. I mean, violence on campus, right? I mean, that's kind of, I know, way to bring down the room. That's and I don't mean to trigger anybody's. Mifal's like, great, I said that. No, I was actually waiting for somebody to bring that up. I mean, there's an inherent risk of being on a college campus because by its very nature, can we restrict access to people coming on a college campus? No. It's really hard to do, folks. I mean, we can have access to doors and stuff. I mean, if you've ever visited somebody at a university in the residence halls and stuff, you can see that the access is somewhat limited and stuff. But like classrooms, academic classrooms aren't. I mean, no matter where you go to school, it doesn't matter if it's here or OCC or Wayne State or Walsh College or Michigan State or Western Michigan. I mean, it doesn't matter, right? I mean, you've got all of that going on. Is that a risk? Is that a condition that can potentially be unsafe? That's the type of thing we're also talking about. We're talking about like the physical aspects of the job, standing too much, sitting too much typing, too much staring at a computer screen. But we're also talking about the environment. Somebody said getting sick. That's actually an interesting one, right? In this environment, we're pretty lucky, but there are environments in the world where communicable diseases are actually like a really big risk. And so I'll tell you a story about that from when Tom came home from a trip once. You wanted to add something?
Oh yeah, when I went to Wayne State, so we had like a whole bunch of homeless people who used to come in like during the summer or whatever. And,
Okay.
Like a lot of them used to talk to themselves and they would like sit at the table. So sometimes the security guard would.
You have to tell them to leave. Yeah. Yep. Yeah, I mean, I've seen that at multiple campuses. Yeah, in addition to Wayne State. What building was that in? Was that in Old Main?
It was in like no, it wasn't in Old Main. It wasn't in Old Main. It was in like the student center.
Oh, okay, yeah. Oh, yeah, because the Student Center is really nice.
There was that,
Yeah.
and,
Yeah.
what was that other building? It's like a art building. Like people rarely went into the art building. That was like on what's that street? That one street next to the restaurants and stuff. There's Barnes and Nobles. Anyway, it was like that
Well, that's Cass.
in the art building.
Yeah,
Is it
that's
Cass?
Cass. Yeah, that's Cass.
So,
Yep.
yeah.
Okay. So yeah, I mean that happens, and that happens at a lot of colleges. I've seen it at OU, as a matter of fact. I met one of my former students in the Kresge Library at OU, up in Rochester, and she actually did not have a place to live at the time. She was without a home, and she was living in the library because it was open 24/7, and she was concerned it was the end of the semester. And she was going to be told that she had to leave because the library was physically going to be locked, and she didn't know where to go. So you can see, and I'm not saying that because there was a safety risk there. I don't anticipate that she would cause problems, but we can see that a lot of this really comes down to analyzing, okay, what hazards exist in the nature of this job? And it's all different types of hazards. It's like the physical aspect of the job, but it's the environment itself as well. Yes?
So what would be the hazard analysis if you're in construction?
Oh my goodness, right? What are you building? You're building a house. What are all the things that can go wrong?
I mean, like even physical conditions. I mean, knee problems, back problems.
You got it.
How do you avoid all of that?
I know.
Every job.
How do you avoid all of that? It's a big deal. I know. Yep. So you've got equipment that can help. You've got techniques that can help. So if anybody's ever worked in retail, you're supposed to lift with your legs, not your back. I see signs around about that all the time, right? So it's teaching people ergonomically how to move their bodies to do a job, maybe using tools or adaptations for tools so that people aren't stooping over all the time. But the nature of the work itself is risky. And so you would see the accident rate in construction being much higher than in other fields because it's inherent in the job, right? So it's all relative. Absolutely. So we're gonna look around the environment, and we're gonna try to make the conditions as safe as we can. The next thing that we're gonna do is we're gonna teach our employees to behave, to act accordingly, right? To act in a safe manner. So first of all, if safety is let's say we are in construction and we're hiring workers for construction, we can actually interview prospective employees to say, what are the things that get at the heart of, what are the things that you do to keep yourself safe on the job? Not sure I would ask the question exactly like that, but I might develop some sort of a situation that says, hey, suppose this is the thing that's inherent, that's going on with this job. What would you do to keep yourself safe? And if the candidate said, I'd just roll with it, I'd be like, oh boy, I don't know if they really know what it takes to keep themselves safe. But if they say, you know what, this is what I'm going to do because this is what I did in my last job to keep myself safe, okay, I've got a candidate now that I'm interviewing for a job that gets safety. So we can interview candidates if we want them to get safety, we can interview them for that, okay? So we can do that through our recruiting and selecting processes. We obviously will train people to do the right thing. we may have to tap into motivation. This is such a big deal with habits, things like putting locks back on machinery, and wearing safety goggles, and wearing our steel-toed shoes, and making sure that we have gloves on and stuff like that. A lot of that taps into people's motivation. So you can motivate people generally in two ways, right? You can motivate them with a carrot, or you can motivate them with a with a stick, right? So that motivation can either be positive reinforcement or punishment, right? And so I guess you just have to decide what it is that you want to do. It sort of goes back to your culture, right? And then your style as a manager. You can ask employees to help you figure out how they can act more safe. I mean, that's a huge deal. One of my capstone students a few years ago, Sid, works in an automotive supplier facility. And he was in charge of the safety audit. So the corporate safety director came out and did a safety audit at Sid's plant. And they failed. They failed miserably. They failed every aspect, unsafe conditions, unsafe acts, and they call it hygiene, like housekeeping. Like, just how neat is your facility? Is it a mess? Is there shit everywhere? Or do you guys put stuff back? Is it organized? Because that also ties into a safety culture. They failed. Like, it was a really, really bad thing. And so he was put in charge of turning this around. And he was like, I'm not going to lie, I was pretty intimidated by it. And he happened to be in my capstone class at the time. And he made it a project. He wanted to lead his crew to turn things around. So he made it his leadership project for his capstone class. And he actually was able to get the team of employees together and do things like, hey, what do you guys think we can do to make this better? What are your ideas? What are the things that you want to see? Do you need to see something from management? Do you need to see something from each other? Do you need to see something from me? As a matter of fact, he walked around with a wastebasket one day. He got so mad that there was shit everywhere that he walked around with a wastebasket one day and he started just throwing stuff away. And it was trash. It was like legitimately trash. And he just picked it up and started throwing it away. What do you think his employees did? Ultimately, they did. What do you think their initial reaction was, though? They were like, what's Sid doing? And I gotta explain Sid. Sid's physical appearance is menacing. Like, he's a big dude. He's a big dude. He's got a big, booming voice. He's a nice guy, but he doesn't exactly come across that way. And he is. I mean, as soon as he talks to you, you know he's a really nice guy, but he's a menacing dude, right? And he's walking, and he always has that serious look on his face. And he's walking around with a trash can, throwing shit away. And everybody's like, oh, Sid's pissed. But you're right, Robert. What happened was that he was modeling behavior that he wanted everybody else to do, and they did it. So he got his employees involved. He said, what's it going to take? He used some motivation. He used some incentives. He chose to go the carrot route, not the stick route, which I applauded him. I personally can relate to that better. I'm better with carrots than sticks. And so they came back for a re-audit. Part of failing the audit was they were going to come back in, I can't remember how many days, if it was 90, 180, whatever it was. And Sid's goal was that they were going to not just pass, but they were actually going to achieve the highest rating. And they did. He totally turned it around because of that. He had to work at getting people to behave differently. A lot of times that's what we have to do. We have to get people to behave differently. That's a big deal. And it happens in almost every workplace that's imaginable. Now, we think safety and we think like machines and trash and stuff, but there's actually like health things that we are also responsible for. When they remodeled C Building, this was such a comforting thought. They remodeled C Building they started it 4 years ago. And I remember they were coming in on the weekends. And this building was built in 1963 or 64 or something. So it was pretty obvious that it was going to have asbestos in it. And so we joked around with the construction workers one day who were here in C Building. I'm like, oh yeah, you probably can't wait for us to leave so you can start remediating the asbestos. Guys like, oh no, we've been doing that every weekend for 6 months. cool. Thanks for letting us know. I feel so safe. Right. And so, like, we're responsible. If our building has this, we're responsible. My husband came back from a trip from China when Asian bird flu was a problem. One year, he came back. He was on a trip in China. He was on a flight from Shanghai to Detroit, and it was determined after the flight had ended that there was a passenger on board that flight that did in fact have the Asian flu. His company would not let him come to work. They said, you can work from home, and you need to work, obviously. You can't just take vacation time. We need you. But they said, you are not allowed in the office. You can't come in until your incubation period has passed. And then if you don't present symptoms, go to the clinic that we use, our employer uses, go to the clinic, tell them about this, have them certify that you're not presenting any of these symptoms, and then you can come back into the office. That's crazy. It was a really interesting time. But employers are responsible for that. He worked in a building with 2,200 employees. I mean, it kind of wouldn't take much for, like, if he came back and he was carrying something to infect, hundreds of people that he came into contact with. That's crazy. Yeah, so the employer had to be really aware of that. Absolutely. We have areas of the country where we have like manufacturing facilities that we can't hire enough employees because we can't find people to pass drug tests. Is it? Is it? I mean, kind of not to be a downer, but opioid addiction is really impacting the workforce. And you'll see employers talk about this. There's an RV production facility in Indiana. Indiana is like the RV capital of the world. That's like apparently where all the planet's RVs are built. And they had a manager of a facility on a interview, and he was like, I literally can't find people to work for me. We are literally turning business away because we can't find employees to work for us because we can't find people that can pass a drug test. That's how bad it is, right? I mean, that's a big deal. You can't have people working in your workplace that have a substance abuse problem. It's not safe. In my 9:30 class this morning, and I don't know if you've ever experienced this, but in my 9:30 class, somebody was telling me about how people's unsafe behavior, it's kind of a thing with bartenders. A lot of bartenders end up drinking.
I had, 2 months ago, I had a house worker, 2 bartenders get fired because the bartender was giving the house worker alcohol, like putting in kids' cups, and like they were friends, and just like was sliding under.
Right.
And managers like opened the cameras because the house worker was acting weird.
Wow.
Drunk.
So first of
I mean,
all,
he wasn't
stealing,
drunk, he was
obviously.
drunk, yeah, he was
Right.
drunk.
First of all,
They
stealing,
got
but secondly,
fired
that's
on
a
the
huge
spot.
safety risk.
And they got fired on the spot. And also when I used to work at a restaurant, 2 servers got like really like weird during the night, and really like the owner, like he owns like 10 of those restaurants, and he was there that night. He literally pulled out the breathalyzer and made them blow the breathalyzer. And
Did they fail?
Yeah. Like that's how aware he was of that problem that he had a breathalyzer on him. Yeah, that's weird.
Kind of a sad sign, isn't it? Yeah. Guy walks around with a breathalyzer. I mean, what does that say about your work environment, right? I mean, that's just like such a
And
sad
no
thing.
one could say anything, like you cannot say like it's illegal because it's not, because when you get hired, you sign something that says.
And it's a
like,
safety
you're gonna have
risk,
random
yeah.
Drug tests, you're gonna have like this and that.
Yeah.
Because you don't know what to say.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, substance abuse is a huge issue in a lot of workplaces. When you think about that, right? I mean, that's a really big risk. So, right, making sure that we're addressing those, making sure we have a policy, like making employees sign for stuff that says, hey, I understand when I'm on the clock, this is how I have to behave, and if I don't, I know I'm subject to, whatever happens to me, and that's the way it is, absolutely. Definitely things like stress. Wasn't there just last week somebody that went into a production facility, was in Illinois, he got fired and he came in and unfortunately shot 5 employees, killed 5 employees. I mean, we see stress becoming a huge issue in the workplace, and if we tie that with mental health, right? Our mental health, just like our physical health, but our mental health in the workplace and what impact that might have in our workplace. Folks, that's probably, I'm going to say that's just as much of an issue right now for employers universally as it is like making sure the locking mechanisms are on the machines and employees are wearing goggles. I would, if somebody, you know, if we were to ask employers today, are you more concerned with somebody losing a finger or somebody experiencing burnout and reacting negatively in the workplace or somebody being addicted to drugs, they would definitely say number 2. They wouldn't say number 1. We're not as concerned with the machinery and the, you know, the wearing of the goggles. We're way more concerned with people's mental health and what jobs do and how we behave on the jobs and how that impacts people. So that's actually a really, really big deal. Violence is also something that we're required to try to prevent. And so you see in your chapter, and I think I would like you, if I have a page number, it's usually because I want you to write it down, but there are some ways that we will improve our security measures, similar to what I just mentioned about the shooting incident last week at a production facility, and I think it was outside Chicago. It was either Illinois or Missouri. I'm sorry, I can't remember. But having proper security measures. I can tell you on campus for a really, really long time in the cashier's office, on campus, there were no security measures. And if you know a thing or two about money, you probably can follow that the fact that people sometimes get really crazy about money. Like money makes people crazy. The lack of money makes people crazy. The feeling that somewhere my money isn't my money anymore makes people crazy. It makes them sometimes very violent. And we actually had a couple of issues. My very first semester here on campus, we had a student who was a student in one of my classes who was walking around telling everybody he was going to shoot up the campus because the college wouldn't give him his money. That he kept saying, quote unquote, the college will not give me my money. There is now glass in the cashier's office, right? There are physical barriers to that, unfortunately. But it's the employer's responsibility to make sure that we're safe. Absolutely. We can, when we screen candidates for jobs, that's why we do background checks. That's why we check criminal histories. That's why we check those things, is because we conduct drug tests because we need to do our homework there and make sure that we are hiring safe people. People's behavior at work is also can sometimes be a really big issue. And so if we have a current employee that we feel that there is an issue with, we're trying to create environments where if people see something, they're encouraged to tell us about it, and we really struggle with that. When you read stories about incidents that happen in the workplace, you'll usually hear about, yeah, you know, we kind of saw some signs with that person, but we didn't want to say anything. And so we're trying to really change that line of thinking, and how do we change that line of thinking, right? One other part of this is also security. And so it's security from any type of disaster, really. So let's say that we have some really unexpected bad weather. How do we recover from that? Let's say we have a huge ice storm, the power's out for a week. How do we recover from that? Can we function as a business if the power is out for a week? For those of you who are old enough to remember, that was 2003, right? The great blackout of 2003. That was actually a really big deal. We experienced severe interruptions because of the interruption in the grid. And so we have to protect our employees against those disasters as well. So there's something just with the physical arrangement, the mechanical security, what technology we put in. I don't know if you've noticed, as we've renovated buildings here on campus, there are a lot more cameras. Every building has cameras now that's been renovated. That never happened before, but that's a big change. You can see some of them are outside as well. That is not. There are no cameras in academic classrooms. Yes, but if there are, no, it's not. No, actually, there were faculty that got really upset about seeing things like this, and they thought they were cameras, and they thought they were being spied on. It's not. It's not. It's Wi-Fi. It's Play though. It's just Play Wi-Fi. It doesn't really work. So I mean, C building. It's it's not known for its Wi-Fi strength. So yeah, we definitely have ways of keeping our employees, our customers, very, very safe. Those of you who work in customer-facing positions, right, you know that that security is really important to you as well. You want to make sure that there are things on hand in today's world with the recording that we have. Now, some employees definitely feel sort of sketchy about that. I had professors that teach at this college that were like, get that out of my room, that's a camera, that's secret, that's infringing on my academic freedom, get it out of my classroom. But, I mean, privacy is a thing, right? Privacy is a thing. I don't know. I'm not sure why college professors feel.
Why would a professor not be okay with having this?
What do you think? Relisha, the question wasn't even finished, and she's like, because they're doing something.
This is like, you know,
If I'm doing my job, I don't care. If I'm doing my job, I don't care. Right. Why would you care if you're doing your job? You know, college professors are weird that way. Even college professors who do their job, academic freedom is like this value that professors hold really, really, really closely, and they feel like they should never loosen their grip on it, because once they do, they're going to be told what to do. And I think, I don't know, college professors are allergic to being told what to do. I'm going to argue that a fair amount of them are really content in what they do, and it may not meet any good standards of what good education looks like. That would be my argument. I don't care. I'm doing a good job. You record away on my ass. I really don't care. Absolutely. Because I'm doing the right things. So I don't know. I suspect it's maybe that high level of comfort, and they just want to get away with stuff. Yeah. Yep. Exactly. But that's why you see, like, you know, you see even here, my employer here has notifications. I'm not sure why. Well, I know why one of them's by the phone. But that, you know, like that was actually a really big deal when they renovated the rooms. If you notice, there's actually a phone jack over by the door. And when they renovated the rooms, they put the teacher station up here, and they put the phone over there. And we walked in and we were like, does that make sense? If there's a security incident in your room and you need to get to the phone, why would you put it across the room? Like literally the furthest point across the room from me. It's kind of bizarro. And I don't know if you know this, but you're not supposed to use your cell phone on campus in an emergency, because if you dial 911 on your cell phone, it goes to the Warren Police Department. It doesn't go to campus police. And so you want it to go to campus police because, of course, they respond faster, I think, from what they tell me. I think. I don't know. They used to be in this building. They're not anymore. So, I mean, those are the things, like that's why employers put things like evacuation procedures up, right? In the event of, this is what we should be doing. Because why? Because it's their obligation to do that. So we would want to have a basic security program that says, okay, are we putting glass where it needs to be? Are we locking things? Are there things that are restricted access, right? Do we have organizational security in terms of, do we know who's in charge if there's a disaster that happens? Do we have evacuation plans? We do. If you can read that font right there, you can tell that there are emergency guidelines. I don't know if you've ever seen that. So, and then do our plans provide a secure environment, but do they not infringe on employee privacy? Okay. So, are your employers doing enough where you work? Is anybody going to walk in and be like, hey, what do we do in case of this? You need to start doing more random drug testing? Wouldn't be able to hire anybody? Wouldn't be able to hire anybody.
We're short-staffed tonight.
Wow. That's really sad, isn't it? Yeah. It's troublesome. Yeah, it's definitely troublesome. All right. How's your study guide looking? We kind of went through it in a different way this time. Yeah, that's no good. I couldn't just sit here and write while you blabbed, McLean.
I don't even know what to write down. Aren't all the PowerPoints on your Canvas?
Absolutely. There's narrated lectures. I mean, gasp, you could read the chapter too, right? You could. You could. I mean, it's a crazy idea. I wouldn't be so bold as to suggest it.
All my crib sheet came from the book, and I didn't do as good as I wanted to on the exam.
So remember, study guide, crib sheet. Those,
Guide, my Bible, and stuff.
yeah, those who did it will attest to it. Don't believe me, believe them. Okay, so Tuesday's class. Here's the deal. You've got an in-class assignment. You're going to be performing a safety audit. So when you come in, you need to by the time you come in, when you come in, you should already be familiar with unsafe conditions and unsafe acts, okay? You're going to be asked to travel around campus to spot unsafe conditions and unsafe acts. You can have your phone, you can take pictures, you can take video. I'm going to ask you not to take video of people's faces because I don't want to get in trouble for that. I've never been in trouble for it, but I don't want to start now. And I will tell you, it's getting increasingly harder as we renovate our buildings to find unsafe conditions. So you're really going to have to put your thinking caps on and really be aware of your surroundings for that. We're going to do this event, rain, shine, snow, whatever, and you're going to have to walk outside. You'll have enough time that you could walk over to RS&T. RS&T are the manufacturing program buildings. They have not been renovated, by the way. They're buildings, so that's kind of fun. You can go as far as the Expo Center if you want, which is P Building, directly like kitty corner from where we're standing, and that's where all the gyms are and the softball fields and everything like that over like Hayes and Martin. K Building, a lot of the buildings in the quad here, I think all of them except D have been renovated. D is the only building that has not been renovated. Just because the building's been renovated, though, doesn't mean you're not going to find an unsafe condition or an unsafe act, though. Okay, it just means it's a little harder to find an unsafe condition in one of the newer buildings. So be aware of that. Be ready for that. We do that in-class assignment, rain or shine. Have a great weekend.
Good luck with today's lesson.